This story is inspired by a real near-death experience. Names and events have been altered to protect privacy and enhance dramatization. If you've experienced an ND or know someone who has, share your story in the comments. The morning air was crisp, charged with an electric excitement that only comes with race day. Rows of runners stretched and chatted along the barricaded city streets, their bright outfits contrasting with the deep blue sky. Among them was a 28-year-old woman, her lean frame and confident posture marking her as someone who had spent months preparing for this moment. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, a glint of determination in her hazel eyes as she adjusted her fitness tracker and took a deep breath. For her, this marathon was more than just a physical challenge. It was a personal milestone, a culmination of endless early morning runs and grueling training sessions. It was also a way of proving something to herself, that she could push past limits, that she could endure. She had always been the type to set ambitious goals, and crossing that finish line was just another step in her journey of self-mastery. The streets were packed with cheering crowds, their voices a chorus of encouragement that blended with the upbeat music blaring from the loudspeakers. Volunteers handed out water and energy gels, while photographers crouched along the starting line, capturing the anticipation on every runner's face. The woman tightened her shoelaces one last time and joined the mass of participants. Her heart raced, not from nerves, but from the adrenaline that came with the challenge ahead. The race began with a burst of energy as the runners surged forward. The rhythmic pounding of shoes against asphalt became a shared heartbeat, a unifying pulse that carried the group through the first few miles. The woman found her rhythm quickly, her stride smooth and confident. The cityscape blurred around her as she focused on the steady cadence of her breath and the encouraging words of spectators holding handmade signs along the route. By mile 5, she felt invincible. Her training had paid off, and her body responded with precision to every push and pull of muscle. The crisp morning air filled her lungs, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that this would be her best race yet. But as she approached the halfway mark, something changed. It started as a subtle tightening in her chest, easy to dismiss as a side stitch or a momentary hiccup in her breathing. She shook it off and pressed on, determined not to lose her pace. Yet the sensation didn't fade. Instead, it grew sharper, a pressure that spread from her chest to her arms. Her vision blurred for a fraction of a second, the world around her seeming to warp as if viewed through rippling water. She slowed her pace, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The tightening in her chest now felt like a vice, squeezing the air from her lungs. Her mind raced, a mix of confusion and denial. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had trained for months, undergone physicals, taken every precaution. Her body was supposed to be strong, unbreakable. The noise of the crowd dimmed as she stumbled to the side of the road. Runners passed her, their faces a blur of concern and determination as they continued toward their goals. A volunteer approached her, shouting something she couldn't quite make out. The pressure in her chest intensified, and the edges of her vision darkened. Her legs buckled, and the pavement rushed up to meet her. Lying on the ground, she was vaguely aware of the chaos around her. Voices shouted instructions. A siren wailed in the distance, and someone's hands pressed against her chest, performing compressions. The pain in her chest was overwhelming, a crescendo of agony that left no room for thought or fear. Then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The world went silent, the pain vanished, and she felt weightless. The chaos around her receded into nothingness, leaving her suspended in a void of absolute stillness. She awoke to a sensation of floating, as if she were suspended in a vast, weightless expanse. The heaviness and pain from moments ago were gone, replaced by an almost surreal lightness. Her first thought was confusion, but it quickly gave way to awe. She opened her eyes, or at least it felt like she did. There was no ceiling above her, no sky, no horizon. Instead, she found herself surrounded by an infinite, shimmering ocean that stretched in all directions. The The water was impossibly clear, its surface reflecting soft hues of gold and pink. The air, or what she thought of as air, felt warm and gentle, carrying a faint melody that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't music in the traditional sense, but a harmonious hum that resonated deep within her, both soothing and compelling. She looked down, expecting to see her body, but what she saw was unlike anything she had ever known. Her form was translucent, glowing faintly with a soft white light. She could make out the shape of herself, her hands, her legs, but they seemed less solid, more like an outline of energy than flesh and bone. Yet she didn't feel alarmed. There was no fear here, only an overwhelming sense of peace. The ocean beneath her shimmered with movement. Patterns of light danced across its surface, creating shapes and symbols that felt familiar, yet unrecognizable. She felt drawn to them, as if they were trying to tell her something. As she stepped forward, or perhaps she floated, ripples of light spread out from where her feet touched the surface, forming intricate constellations beneath her. Each step seemed to create a new pattern, a trail of glowing symbols that dissolved into the endless water. In the distance, she noticed a faint glow, brighter than the surrounding light. It pulsed gently, beckoning her. Without hesitation, she moved toward it, the melody growing clearer as she approached. It was no longer just a hum, but a series of notes, rising and falling like a song sung by the universe itself. She felt her heart, or whatever essence of herself remained, pulled toward the glow, as if it held answers to questions she didn't yet know to ask. As she drew closer, the glow revealed itself to be an enormous tree, its trunk and branches unlike anything earthly. The tree appeared to be made of light itself, its branches stretching infinitely in all directions, each one glowing with threads of energy. These threads extended far beyond her sight, connecting to points of light on the horizon and beyond. The closer she looked, the more she realized that each thread carried tiny bursts of color, like sparks traveling along a wire. The tree emanated a feeling of immense age and wisdom, as though it had existed since the beginning of time. She felt a deep reverence for it, an instinctive understanding that it was more than just a tree. It was alive, sentient, aware of her presence. Standing beneath its vast canopy, she felt small but not insignificant, like a single note in a grand symphony. At the base of the tree, a glowing portal began to form, shimmering like liquid light. She hesitated for the first time, unsure of what lay beyond. But the tree's presence was comforting, reassuring her without words that she was safe. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward and peered into the portal. Inside, she saw scenes from her life, vivid and detailed, as if they were unfolding right in front of her. They weren't just memories. They were moments brought to life. She saw herself as a child, running barefoot through her grandmother's garden, the sunlight filtering through the leaves. She felt the joy of that moment, the warmth of the sun, and the love of her grandmother, who had passed years ago. The scene shifted to her teenage years, an argument with a close friend over something she now realized was trivial. The memory stung, but she also felt the weight of it lift, as though the tree was helping her see it from a place of understanding rather than regret. Another shift. She was in her early 20s, working late nights on a project she believed in but doubted herself over. Her exhaustion was palpable, but so was a quiet pride when she finished it and saw how her efforts had helped others. Each memory brought with it an emotional clarity, a realization of how every action, big or small, had created ripples that touched the lives of others. As the portal continued to shift, she began to see figures emerging from the light. The first was her father, who had passed away a decade earlier. He looked younger than she remembered, his face calm and serene, radiating a love so pure it brought tears to her eyes, or at least a sensation of them. He didn't speak, but his presence filled her with everything she had longed to say and hear. Forgiveness, pride, love, all of it flowed between them without a single word. More figures appeared. An old friend who had died in a tragic accident, a teacher who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Each one brought with them a sense of connection and closure, a chance to feel the impact they had on her life and the ways she had influenced theirs. She wanted to stay, to bask in their presence, but the tree's glow began to intensify, drawing her attention upward. The threads of light in the branches above shimmered brighter, and she felt a new presence descending toward her. It wasn't a figure or a shape, but a formless orb of pure, radiant energy. Its light was so intense that she instinctively closed her eyes, though she quickly realized she didn't need them here. She could feel the presence in every part of her being, as if it knew her completely. The orb communicated with her, not with words, but with a wave of emotions and images that filled her mind. It showed her a vision of a possible future, moments where her actions would create ripples far greater than she had ever imagined. She saw herself inspiring others, offering comfort to those in pain, and making connections that would ripple outward in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. She felt awe, humility, and a deep longing to stay in this place of understanding and peace. But the orb's message was clear. She couldn't remain here. Her time wasn't over. There was more for her to do, more lives to touch, more paths to walk. The tree and the ocean began to dissolve into light, the melody fading into silence. She felt herself being pulled away, back toward the void she had emerged from. Panic flared for a brief moment, but the orb's warmth reassured her, filling her with the certainty that she would carry this experience with her, that she was not alone. The last thing she saw before the light vanished was the tree, its infinite branches shimmering one final time before the world went dark. As the tree's light shimmered around her, the glowing figures she had seen began to take shape. Their forms were radiant and fluid, like living sculptures made of light. They were both familiar and otherworldly, their presence carrying an undeniable weight of love and connection. The woman's translucent figure stood still, her glowing hands trembling as she gazed at the first figure stepping forward. It was her father. She hadn't seen him in over a decade, not since he had passed suddenly from a heart attack. But here he was, whole, glowing, and radiating a peace she had never seen in him during his life. His features were younger, softened by a gentle smile that reached his glowing eyes. He didn't speak, but his presence carried an unmistakable message: love, pride, and the assurance that he had always been with her. Her heart, or the essence of what she was in this place, ached. Memories of him flooded her mind. She remembered how he had taught her to ride a bike, his patience as she stumbled and fell. She remembered the arguments during her rebellious teenage years, moments of hurt that had never been fully resolved. And she remembered the day she got the call that he was gone, a sharp, irreparable void that had defined her life for years afterward. "I missed you," she thought, the words forming in her mind rather than her lips. Somehow, she knew he understood. His smile deepened, his glowing form radiating a warmth that felt like a hug, even though she couldn't touch him. For the first time in years, the guilt and unresolved pain she had carried began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of peace. As her father's figure began to fade, another step forward. This time, it was her childhood best friend Lily, who had died in a car accident when they were just 17. Lily's glowing form was vibrant, her movements light and playful, just as they had been in life. She radiated joy, and her presence brought a flood of bittersweet memories. Sleepovers filled with whispered secrets, late-night adventures under the stars, and the shared dreams of two inseparable girls. The woman felt tears that weren't physical stream down her glowing face. "I'm so sorry," she thought, the memory of their last fight surfacing. It had been over something petty, a boy, a misunderstanding, but it had been the last conversation they'd ever had. The regret of that moment had haunted her for years. Lily's form leaned closer, her radiant energy washing over the woman like a soft breeze. There was no anger, no blame. Instead, Lily's presence radiated forgiveness and understanding, as if to say, "It's okay. I always knew you cared." The weight of the guilt lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love. One by one, more figures emerged from the light. There was her first teacher, Mr. Patel, who had recognized her potential and encouraged her to embrace her creativity. His form radiated pride and reminded her of the way he had once told her, "You can create something beautiful from even the simplest things." There was a kind stranger she barely remembered, a woman who had offered her a seat on a crowded bus during a rough day. Each figure brought with it a moment of connection, a reminder of the threads of humanity that bound her to others. Each encounter filled her with a profound realization. These moments, these people, had shaped her life in ways she had never fully understood. Even the smallest gestures, an encouraging word, a helping hand, had rippled outward, touching her and others in ways she couldn't have imagined. She felt as though she were seeing her life for the first time, not as a series of disconnected events, but as part of a larger, intricate web of meaning. The glowing portal at the base of the tree began to shift again, its light swirling into new shapes. This time, it didn't show her memories. Instead, it showed her potential futures. The first image was simple but powerful. She was standing in front of a small group of people, sharing her story. Her glowing figure in the vision radiated confidence and vulnerability as she spoke, her words touching those who listened. She saw their faces change, expressions softening as they connected with her experiences. The scene shifted. She was working in a community space, helping to organize events and resources for those in need. The light in the vision focused on her hands as they gently guided others, building something meaningful together. She could feel the gratitude and hope of the people she was helping, their energy intertwining with hers. Another shift. She was with her family, repairing broken relationships, laughter filling the room. There was love and healing in their interactions, the kind she had always longed for but never fully believed was possible. As the visions continued, she began to understand. The tree was showing her not what was predetermined, but what was possible. These futures weren't guarantees. They were opportunities, paths she could choose to walk as she embraced the chance she had been given. A profound sense of responsibility settled over her. She realized that the presence of her father, Lily, and the other figures wasn't just about reconciliation or closure. It was about reminding her of the power of connection, of how even the smallest actions could create ripples that touched countless lives. She felt humbled by the enormity of it, but also inspired. The light around her began to shift, growing brighter, more intense. The melody she had heard earlier swelled, filling the space with a sense of finality. She looked back at the tree, its infinite branches glowing with threads of light. It seemed to pulse with approval, as if it too understood what she had come to realize. From above, a new presence descended, a luminous orb of pure, radiant energy. It was different from the figures she had encountered, larger and more formless. Its light was almost overwhelming, and she instinctively closed her eyes, though she could still feel its energy. The orb didn't speak, but its presence filled her with a profound understanding. It showed her the threads of her life, how they connected to others and to the larger tapestry of existence. It conveyed a single powerful thought. Your journey is not complete. Your greatest work lies ahead. She wanted to argue, to say that she wasn't ready, that she didn't know how to live up to what she had seen. But the orb's light filled her with reassurance. It wasn't asking her to be perfect or to have all the answers. It was only asking her to try, to take the next step, and to trust that the path would reveal itself. As the orb began to fade, the light of the tree and the ocean around her grew brighter, until it was all-consuming. The melody reached its crescendo, and she felt herself being pulled upward, away from the glowing figures, the tree, and the endless ocean of light. One thought echoed in her mind as the world dissolved around her. I am not done. As the world of light faded, she felt herself moving, though there was no sensation of effort. It was as if an invisible current carried her upward, away from the radiant tree and the glowing figures. The melody that had accompanied her journey softened into a gentle hum, a faint echo that seemed to follow her. She wasn't sure where she was going, but the calm assurance of the presence she had felt before lingered, urging her forward. The glow around her began to shift, becoming brighter and more concentrated. It was no longer the diffuse light of the endless ocean or the intricate patterns beneath her feet. Instead, it was pure, radiant, and impossibly intense. She instinctively shielded her eyes, though she realized almost immediately that she didn't need to. This was a place beyond physical sensation, where everything was perceived through her essence rather than her body. The brightness coalesced into an orb of light, immense and overwhelming. It didn't have a defined shape, yet it seemed alive, pulsating with energy. She could feel it looking at her, not with eyes, but with an all-encompassing awareness. It was as if every part of her, every thought, memory, and action was laid bare before this presence. Yet, there was no judgment. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of understanding and compassion, a warmth that enveloped her like a cocoon. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to do, but the presence didn't demand anything of her. Instead, it began to communicate, not with words but with waves of emotion and thought that resonated deeply within her. She didn't just hear its message. She felt it, experienced it as though it were a part of her. The first wave was a reminder of what she had seen: the glowing figures, the tree, the threads of light connecting her life to others. All of it was shown to her again, but now with greater clarity. She saw how the smallest of her actions, sharing a kind word, supporting a friend, even simply listening, had rippled outward, touching lives she had never met. It was humbling and awe-inspiring. She realized that her life wasn't just her own. It was part of something far greater, a vast tapestry of interconnected moments and people. The second wave was a vision of her future, but it wasn't like the glimpses she had seen earlier. This was deeper, more profound. She saw herself standing before a group of people, sharing her story. She didn't recognize their faces, but she felt their emotions, the hope, the comfort, the inspiration they drew from her words. She saw herself creating a space where others could come together, find healing, and rediscover their own strength. The vision shifted, showing her in quieter moments. She was sitting with her family, laughing over dinner, the warmth of their connection filling the room. She was holding the hand of an elderly neighbor, offering comfort during a difficult time. She was guiding a child through a moment of doubt, her words sparking confidence and joy. These weren't grand gestures or monumental achievements. They were simple acts, grounded in kindness and connection, but their impact was undeniable. Each moment radiated outward, forming new threads in the tapestry of life. The final wave was the most powerful. It wasn't a vision or a memory. It was a message, clear and resonant. You are not done, the presence conveyed. Your greatest work lies ahead. The life you lead will touch countless others, and through them, your impact will grow. She felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, humility, fear. She wanted to believe she could live up to this purpose, but doubt crept in. How could she possibly fulfill the potential she was being shown? How could she, just one person, make such a difference? The presence responded without hesitation, its light intensifying. It didn't give her answers or instructions. Instead, it filled her with a sense of trust, not in the universe, but in herself. It reminded her that she didn't need to know the entire path. She only needed to take the first step. The rest would unfold as it was meant to. She felt the doubt begin to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to save the world. She only needed to try, to move forward with intention and love. That was enough. As the presence began to fade, the light around her grew brighter, almost blinding. The melody swelled one final time, reaching a crescendo that reverberated through her entire being. She felt herself being drawn upward, faster and faster, the warmth and peace of the light gradually giving way to a new sensation, a heaviness, a weight, a pull back towards something solid and real. She awoke with a gasp. Her lungs burned as she sucked in air, her chest heaving with effort. The light was gone, replaced by the harsh fluorescence of hospital room lights. The melodic hum had faded, replaced by the steady beeping of machines monitoring her vitals. The peace and weightlessness she had felt were now a distant memory, replaced by the sharp reality of her physical body. It took her a moment to orient herself. Her body felt heavy and weak, her muscles aching as if they had been pushed beyond their limits. She tried to sit up, but the effort was too much. Instead, she lay still, staring at the ceiling as her mind struggled to process everything she had just experienced. A nurse appeared by her bedside, her face a mixture of relief and professionalism. "You're awake," she said softly, checking the monitors. "You gave us quite a scare. You've been out for hours." The woman's voice was hoarse when she spoke. "What happened?" "You collapsed during the marathon," the nurse explained. "Cardiac arrest. You were clinically dead for a few minutes, but the paramedics revived you. You're incredibly lucky." Lucky. The word echoed in her mind, but it didn't feel right. What she had experienced wasn't luck. It was something else entirely. She wanted to tell the nurse about the light, the tree, the presence, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain something so profound, so beyond anything she had ever known? The nurse left to fetch the doctor, and for a while, she was alone. She turned her head to look out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink that reminded her of the ocean she had walked across. She felt tears well up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of gratitude and purpose that had been awakened within her. She didn't know how she would begin to fulfill what she had seen. She didn't know where the path would lead, but she did know one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't done. Hashtag Chapter 5. The return to life. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the first thing she focused on. Its steady, methodical sound grounded her, pulling her fully into the reality she now inhabited. The room smelled sterile, a faint mix of disinfectant and clean linens, with the hum of machines and distant murmurs in the hallway filling the silence. She shifted slightly, the stiffness in her muscles a painful reminder of the ordeal she had just endured. As she lay in the hospital bed, her thoughts raced. The images of the radiant tree, the glowing figures, and the immense presence of light played over and over in her mind like fragments of a dream. But this wasn't a dream. It had felt more real than anything she had ever experienced, more vivid and profound than even the sharpest memories of her life. She touched her chest, half expecting to feel the glow still radiating within her, but all she felt was the faint ache of her heart beating steadily beneath her ribs. The door creaked open, and a doctor entered, a clipboard in hand. He was a man in his late 40s, with a calm demeanor that carried both professionalism and empathy. "You're awake," he said with a small smile, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "That's a very good sign." She nodded slightly, her throat dry. "How long have I been here?" "About 12 hours, he replied. "You collapsed during the marathon. Cardiac arrest. Thankfully, the paramedics were close by, and they acted quickly. They were able to revive you, but it was touch and go for a while. You're very lucky to be alive." Lucky. There was that word again. It didn't feel like luck. Not entirely. She wanted to explain what she had experienced, but the words felt too fragile, too delicate to voice just yet. Instead, she asked, "What caused it?" "The arrest." He glanced at the clipboard, flipping through a few pages. "It seems to have been an arrhythmia, likely triggered by extreme exertion. It's rare, but it happens, even to otherwise healthy people. We'll need to run more tests to determine the exact cause. But for now, the important thing is that you're stable." She nodded again, though her mind was only half focused on his words. The science of it made sense, but it didn't explain what she had seen, what she had felt. There was something bigger at play, something beyond the physical explanation he was offering. "You should rest," the doctor said, standing. "Your body's been through a lot. Let the nurses know if you need anything." She watched him leave, the soft click of the door closing behind him echoing in the quiet room. Rest, he had said, but how could she rest when her mind was alight with questions and revelations? She stared out the window, the cityscape bathed in the golden hues of early evening. The colors reminded her of the ocean she had walked across, the rippling patterns of light beneath her feet. She closed her eyes, willing herself to hold onto the memory before it faded. The next morning, she woke to find her mother sitting beside her bed. The older woman's face was lined with worry, her hands clutching a small coffee cup as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. When their eyes met, her mother exhaled a shaky breath, tears welling up. "You scared me," her mother said softly, setting the cup aside and reaching for her hand. "When I got the call, I didn't know if you'd make it." "I'm okay," she whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. The words felt insufficient, a shallow attempt to reassure when she herself wasn't sure what okay even meant anymore. Her mother's grip tightened. "You've always pushed yourself so hard. I know you love challenges, but you need to take care of yourself. This could have been so much worse." The woman nodded, guilt stirring in her chest. Her mother's words weren't meant to chastise, but they hit a nerve nonetheless. She had spent so much of her life striving, chasing goals, pushing boundaries, proving her worth. But what was it all for? The tree, the figures, the presents. They had shown her something far greater than personal achievement. They had shown her the importance of connection, of the small but profound ways we touch each other's lives. "I know," she said finally. "I'll do better." Her mother's eyes softened, and she leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's all I want." Over the next few days, she remained in the hospital, undergoing tests and gradually regaining her strength. Friends and family visited, their faces a mix of relief and curiosity. Everyone wanted to know how she was feeling, what she had experienced, but she found herself holding back. How could she explain something so vast, so intangible? How could she put into words the radiant light, the immense presence, the threads of life connecting her to others? It wasn't until her best friend, Claire, came to visit that she finally opened up. Claire had always been her confidant, the person she could share anything with. Sitting by the window, a soft breeze filtering through the slightly cracked pane, she began to tell Claire everything. She described the ocean of light, the glowing tree with its infinite branches, the figures who had come to her, and the presence that had filled her with purpose. She spoke of the threads connecting her life to others, the way every small action rippled outward, creating connections she had never understood before. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of what she had seen. Claire listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to awe. When the woman finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice hushed. "That's incredible. It sounds like you were shown something so much bigger than all of us. Like you were given a second chance." The words resonated deeply. A second chance. That's what it was. The presence had told her she wasn't done, that her greatest work lay ahead. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about living with intention, about using this experience to make a difference. By the time she was discharged, she felt a sense of clarity, albeit a fragile one. Stepping out into the bright sunlight, she inhaled deeply, the air feeling fresher, sharper than she remembered. The world seemed different now, more vibrant, more alive. She didn't know where to begin, but she knew she couldn't return to the life she had lived before, a life defined by endless striving and isolation. Her first step was small but significant. She reached out to her family, repairing strained relationships she had neglected in her pursuit of personal goals. She spent time with her mother, cooking dinner together and laughing over old memories. She reconnected with her younger brother, who had always admired her but had felt distant in recent years. Each interaction was a thread, a tiny but meaningful act of mending and connection. She also began volunteering at a local community center. At first, it was small tasks, organizing supplies, helping with events, but it quickly became something more. She found herself drawn to the people there, their stories and struggles reminding her of the vision she had seen. Every smile, every word of encouragement felt like a step toward fulfilling the purpose she had been shown. One evening, as she walked home from the center, the sky turned a brilliant shade of gold, the setting sun casting long shadows across the streets. She stopped for a moment, looking up at the sky. The colors reminded her of the light she had walked through, the glow of the tree, the warmth of the presence. For the first time since her return, she felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. The weeks that followed felt like the beginning of a new life. She no longer saw her days as a list of tasks or challenges to conquer. Instead, every interaction, every decision, every small kindness became a chance to add another thread to the tapestry of connection she had seen in the light. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits of self-doubt and overexertion crept in, but she approached them differently now, with patience and purpose. She began sharing her story in small ways, testing the waters with close friends and family. Their reactions ranged from awe to quiet reflection. Many admitted they had never thought about life as a series of interconnected actions, where even the smallest choices could ripple outward to touch countless others. Her story wasn't just about her near-death experience. It was about what that experience had taught her about life itself. Word of her story spread, and she was invited to speak at a local community event. Standing in front of an audience for the first time since her experience, she felt a flutter of nerves. But as she began to recount her journey, the race, the collapse, the tree, and the radiant presence, a calm settled over her. The words flowed naturally, carrying the same honesty and warmth she had felt in the light. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. People lined up afterward to thank her, to share their own stories of connection, and to tell her how her message had inspired them. This was just the beginning. She dove deeper into her volunteer work, organizing wellness programs for underprivileged communities and mentoring young people who struggled with self-doubt. She used her experience as a foundation, a reminder to herself and others that every small act of kindness mattered. She found immense fulfillment in helping others see their own worth, their own ability to create ripples of change. At the same time, she made sure to nurture her personal life. She spent more time with her family, mending old wounds and creating new memories. She reconnected with friends she had lost touch with and forged deeper bonds with those who had stood by her. Her relationships flourished, no longer built on obligation or routine, but on genuine love and presence. But her transformation wasn't only outward. Internally, she felt a profound shift in how she viewed the world. The light she had experienced during her near-death experience never truly left her. It became a quiet presence within her, guiding her decisions, reminding her to slow down, to listen, and to appreciate the small moments. 1 year after the marathon, she stood at the starting line again. The same vibrant energy buzzed around her. Runners stretching, spectators cheering, music filling the air. But this time, she wasn't here to prove anything to herself. She wasn't chasing a personal record or pushing her body to its limits. She was here to celebrate life. She started the race at a slower pace, smiling at the cheering crowd, waving to the volunteers, and encouraging fellow runners. Along the route, she noticed details she had missed the first time. The laughter of children on the sidelines, the crispness of the morning air, the beauty of the city waking up around her. Every step felt like a victory, not because of the finish line ahead, but because of the journey itself. When she crossed the finish line, her family and friends were waiting for her, their cheers mingling with the crowd. She raised her arms in triumph, tears streaming down her face. This was not just the end of a race, but a testament to the path she had chosen to walk, a path filled with purpose, connection, and love. Her story reminds us that life isn't measured by grand achievements, but by the small, meaningful connections we create every day. Each action, no matter how small, has the power to ripple outward and touch others in ways we may never see. What small act of kindness can you do today? How can you strengthen the threads of connection in your own life? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that celebrates the beauty of the human experience. Together, let's create ripples that make the world a brighter place.